The morning bell echoed across the courtyard of St. Mary's Academy, its shrill clang ricocheting off brick walls, weathered by decades of laughter, tears, and whispered secrets. Children in pressed uniforms rushed inside, the scent of fresh chalk drifting from open classroom doors. Amid the bustling tide of chatter and movement, one figure stood still, a thin girl with a fraying backpack, shoes too small for her growing feet, and eyes that told a story far older than her 12 years. Her name was Emily. Emily clutched her books tightly to her chest, as though afraid the world might snatch them away. The strap of her backpack had been mended with crooked stitches, the kind of work done by small, determined hands with no one else to rely on. She adjusted it nervously as she climbed the front steps, but today the air carried a different weight. Something was wrong. Waiting at the entrance was Principal Harris, a tall man with graying hair, a starched suit, and the kind of stern gaze that silenced children before he even spoke. He had a file tucked under his arm, its corners bent from being opened and closed too many times. When Emily approached, her steps faltering under his stare, Harris cleared his throat. "Emily Carter," he said, his voice carrying across the courtyard like the final note of a gavel. "In my office. Now." The other children glanced curiously but quickly scurried off, not wanting to be caught in the crossfire. Emily's heart pounded as she followed him inside, each step heavy, the polished wooden floor creaking under her worn shoes. The principal's office was cold, its walls lined with awards and photographs of smiling students shaking hands with donors. A faint smell of coffee lingered in the air. Harris gestured for her to sit, but Emily remained standing, clutching her books like armor. He opened the file, scanning the papers. "Emily, we've received notice from the board. Without proof of guardianship and tuition payments, you cannot continue here." The words struck her like a blow. She blinked, her throat tightening. "But, sir, I've been here since second grade. My grades are good. It's not about your grades," Harris interrupted, his tone flat. "It's about rules, and rules exist for a reason." He leaned back, folding his hands. "You're an orphan, and without support, this institution cannot take responsibility for you any longer." The room spun for Emily. Orphan. The word never stopped cutting. She remembered the accident, the screech of tires, the shattering glass, the sudden silence that swallowed her parents forever. Since then, she had lived in the foster system, moving from one temporary home to another, never staying long enough to unpack the small box that held her only belongings. School had been her one constant, her one place of stability, and now even that was being ripped away. Her lips trembled. "Please, Principal Harris, just give me a little time. I'll find a way. I'll work after school. Harris's eyes flickered, but only for a second. He shut the file with a decisive snap. "I'm sorry, Emily. You'll need to collect your things by the end of the day." Emily's chest tightened. The floor seemed to tilt beneath her feet. She wanted to scream, to fight, but the words lodged in her throat. Slowly she turned and walked out, her books pressed so tightly against her ribs that they dug into her skin. The hallway felt longer than ever. Laughter spilled from classrooms, the kind of laughter she might never share again. She passed the window near the staircase and paused, staring out at the playground where children chased one another, their voices carried by the wind. A single tear slipped down her cheek. At the far end of the hall, the janitor, Mr. Lopez, watched quietly. He was an older man with kind eyes who had often slipped Emily extra fruit from the cafeteria or patched her backpack when it tore again. He opened his mouth as if to say something, but hesitated, his gaze shifting toward the principal's office. His silence was its own kind of sorrow. By the time Emily reached her locker, her hands shook too badly to turn the dial. She pressed her forehead against the cool metal, closing her eyes, trying to breathe. And then, faintly, she heard it, the sound of footsteps approaching from the main entrance, heavy, deliberate, and unfamiliar. The atmosphere shifted. Even before she turned, she felt it. Someone had come for her. When she looked up, the sight made her breath catch in her throat. The mysterious figure at the door is about to change everything Emily thought she knew about her life and force Principal Harris to face a truth he never expected. The figure who stepped into the school's front hall carried an air that made the chatter of children fade into silence. He was tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in a simple but well-fitted coat that looked out of place among the polished blazers and pressed skirts of St. Mary's Academy. His boots struck the marble floor with a steady rhythm, each step sending a ripple of curiosity through the students who peeked from classroom doors. Emily froze, her hand still trembling on the locker. She didn't know this man. His face was strong, carved with lines of hardship, his dark hair streaked with grey at the temples. But it wasn't his appearance that made her stare. It was the way his eyes softened the instant they found her, as though he had been searching for her all along. "Emily Carter?" he asked, his voice deep but gentle, carrying across the corridor. The sound of her name, spoken with such certainty, made her heart lurch. She took a hesitant step back. Yes." Principal Harris emerged from his office just then, straightening his tie with irritation. "Sir, this is private school property. State your business." The man didn't even glance at Harris at first. He kept his gaze locked on Emily. "I've come to take her." Whispers rippled through the students who had gathered nearby. Emily's throat tightened. "Take me! Who are you?" Finally, the man turned toward the principal. His presence filled the hallway in a way Harris's starched authority never had. "My name is Daniel Carter. I'm her uncle." The words landed like a thunderclap. Emily's eyes widened. Uncle? She'd never heard of him. Her parents had never spoken about family, not in any detail. For as long as she could remember, she believed she was alone. Harris narrowed his eyes. "There's no record of you in her file. If you're attempting to—" "I've been overseas," Daniel cut in sharply, his jaw tightening. "Military service. By the time I returned, it was too late for my brother and his wife." His voice cracked briefly, almost imperceptibly, but enough to betray a wound that time had not healed. He steadied himself and continued. "Since then, I've been fighting for custody. The papers are final. She belongs with me now." Emily's breath caught. She clutched her books tighter, her mind spinning. An uncle? Custody? None of it made sense. Yet, when she looked into Daniel's eyes, there was something there, something she hadn't seen in a very long time. Not pity, not charity, but recognition. Harris adjusted his glasses, clearly unsettled. "That may be, but even with guardianship, tuition must still be addressed. This institution—" Daniel pulled a folded envelope from his coat pocket and placed it on the nearest desk with a controlled finality. "This should cover everything, and more. Emily stays." The principal's composure cracked, just for a moment. His fingers hovered over the envelope before he picked it up, slipping it discreetly under his papers. His throat bobbed as he swallowed. "Well, if the legal documents are indeed in order, then I suppose we can reconsider." Emily stared at the scene in disbelief. Only minutes ago, she had been cast out, her world crumbling. Now, this stranger, this supposed uncle, was standing between her and the abyss, rewriting the rules with a single gesture. Daniel turned back to her, kneeling slightly to meet her at eye level. His expression softened again. "Emily, I know this is sudden. I don't expect you to trust me right away, but you're not alone anymore, do you understand?" Her lips parted, but no words came. She searched his face, looking for cracks, for insincerity, for anything that might prove this was just another fleeting promise, destined to vanish. But instead, she saw eyes rimmed with sleepless nights, a man who carried grief in his bones, yet still stood unshaken. Her chest tightened painfully, torn between disbelief and the fragile flicker of hope. A bell rang, signaling the start of the next class. But no one moved. The hallway was still charged with unspoken tension. Finally, Principal Harris cleared his throat. "Very well. Miss Carter, you may return to your studies. We'll process the paperwork shortly." Emily glanced at him, then back at Daniel. For the first time since she'd lost her parents, she didn't feel invisible. As the students drifted back into their classrooms, whispering excitedly about the scene they had just witnessed, Emily whispered so quietly she wasn't sure he even heard her. "Why now?" Daniel's jaw flexed. His answer was simple, but heavy with something she couldn't yet name. "Because I should have been here all along." The words sank into her like a stone dropped into water, rippling outward, reshaping everything she thought she knew about her past and her future. The days that followed Emily's reunion with Daniel were filled with a dizzying mix of emotions: relief, wonder, and an undercurrent of tension she couldn't quite name. Moving into Daniel's modest apartment in the city, she felt the unfamiliar warmth of stability. Her own room had walls painted a soft blue, a small desk by the window, and even a shelf where Daniel had carefully arranged her books. Yet, comfort came with complications. Daniel was not just a single man seeking to care for a niece. He was a widower, still grappling with his own grief, haunted by the same accident that had orphaned Emily. At night, he would sit in his living room, staring at the flickering television without really seeing it, hands clasped tightly in his lap. Emily watched him, sensing the distance he tried to keep, even while providing for her every need. School was another battlefield. Although the principal had accepted the paperwork, whispers traveled faster than light. "Emily Carter's uncle is rich," some students said, their voices filled with envy. "She doesn't even have to pay tuition anymore." Others were less forgiving. "She's the orphan everyone pities, now pretending she belongs with someone important." Emily tried to ignore the gossip, but the tension gnawed at her. Every classroom felt like a stage, every glance like an accusation. She longed to confide in someone, but no one knew the half of it, not even her best friend Lucy, who had moved on to another school. Meanwhile, Daniel faced his own struggles. His life, which had been regimented and predictable after years of military service, was suddenly upended by guardianship responsibilities: cooking, school runs, paperwork, emotional negotiations. He felt overwhelmed. More than once, he had caught himself snapping at Emily over minor things, immediately regretting it, the guilt gnawing at his chest. One evening, after a particularly tense parent-teacher meeting, Emily sat at the kitchen table, tears sliding down her cheeks. "I don't belong here," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I can't keep up with all of this. I'm not like the other kids." Daniel, exhausted and tense, paused mid-dishwashing, drying his hands. "Emily, that's not true. You're not supposed to be anyone else but yourself. But it's hard. You know it's hard for both of us, right?" She looked up, startled by his honesty. "I see it," she said softly. "I know you're trying, but sometimes I feel like I'm just a reminder of what we've both lost." Daniel sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Maybe that's true. Maybe that's why this feels so hard. We're both carrying ghosts, Emily. And now, somehow, we're trying to build a life together in the middle of it." At school, things escalated when Principal Harris, feeling the pressure from parents and the board, began scrutinizing Emily's attendance and performance. He had given in to Daniel's legal documentation, but the principal's pride didn't allow him to let the girl feel fully accepted. Every minor misstep, late homework, a forgotten assignment, was magnified. One afternoon, Emily returned home from school, her uniform stained from a lunchroom spill and her eyes swollen from tears she had tried to hide. Daniel looked up from his laptop, concerned. "What happened?" She threw her bag on the floor. "It's never enough. Principal Harris, he keeps saying I'm a problem," the kids whisper. "Even the teachers." Her voice broke. "I don't fit anywhere." Daniel stood, closing the distance between them, placing a hand on her shoulder. "Emily, listen to me. You belong here with me. No one else gets to decide that. Not the school, not the kids, not even me if I falter for a moment. You and I, we're a team now. And teams face tough days, but we survive them together." Her gaze met his, and for the first time she felt the raw power of someone truly on her side. But just as relief washed over her, a new tension emerged. Daniel's business called him away the next week, leaving Emily under the supervision of an assistant she had never met. The fragile connection between them was about to face a test neither of them could fully anticipate. That night, Emily lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. Shadows of doubt flickered across the walls. She thought about Principal Harris and the subtle hostility he still carried, about the whispers at school, and about Daniel leaving for several days. She realized that even though someone had saved her from being cast out, safety was not the same as peace. Her phone buzzed softly. It was a text from Daniel. "I know it's scary, but remember, I'll be back soon. Keep your head high. I believe in you." Emily held the phone to her chest. The words gave her warmth, but also a sense of impending challenge. She knew that the days ahead would demand courage she hadn't yet discovered, and deep down she felt a quiet determination. Something had shifted. She could no longer be the passive child she had been, waiting for life to decide her fate. She would fight, not just to survive at St. Mary's, but to show Principal Harris, the other students, and even herself, that she could be more than the orphan everyone assumed her to be. And as she drifted into a restless sleep, the first sparks of resolve ignited, setting the stage for trials that would test both her and Daniel in ways neither could yet imagine. The following weeks at St. Mary's Academy tested Emily in ways she hadn't anticipated. Even with Daniel's return looming, the school environment seemed determined to challenge her at every turn. Whispers had evolved into pointed remarks. Teachers treated her like she was fragile, while classmates alternated between pity and envy. Every hallway felt like a gauntlet, every glance a judgment. During one particularly grueling day, Emily returned from gym class to find her locker vandalized. A note pinned inside read, "Money can't buy you friends, orphan." Her stomach churned, and for the first time, tears weren't enough to shield her. She clutched the note, her knuckles white, feeling a surge of helplessness. Meanwhile, Daniel was still juggling his responsibilities. Between overseeing his construction company's major project and traveling for client meetings, he barely had time to breathe. When he finally returned home one evening, he found Emily curled on the sofa, the note still in her hand, her face pale and weary. "Emily," he said, his voice soft but firm. "Talk to me. What happened?" She shook her head, choking on the lump in her throat. "It's nothing. I can handle it." "No," Daniel insisted, kneeling in front of her. "You don't have to handle this alone. Show me." She handed him the note, trembling. Daniel read it, his jaw tightening as he scanned the cruel words. The anger that surged was tempered by an immediate realization. The battle wasn't only about her safety or schooling, it was about her sense of belonging, her confidence, her self-worth. "This stops," he said, his voice low, controlled, but carrying the weight of authority. "Tomorrow we go together. Principal Harris will see the kind of community we're supposed to have here, and that includes standing up for what's right." The next day, Emily walked into the principal's office with Daniel by her side. Harris looked up, eyebrows raised, his habitual air of control slightly frayed. "Good morning, Mr. Carter. Miss Carter," he said, his voice measured. "Principal Harris," Daniel began, placing a firm hand on Emily's shoulder. "Emily has endured enough. The note she found in her locker yesterday, someone on your staff or among your students created it. She should not face this alone. I want assurance that this environment is safe for her." Harris shifted uncomfortably. His pride bristled, but he also understood the legal and social weight of Daniel's position. "We'll investigate," he said, his tone clipped. "Emily will not be targeted further." Emily nodded, but the victory felt hollow. That afternoon, the first student she confronted whispered, "You think you're better than us now because your uncle's rich?" She clenched her fists, feeling a storm of frustration. "I don't think I'm better than anyone," she said, her voice trembling but defiant. I want to be treated fairly." The tension escalated over the next few days. Emily found herself navigating a labyrinth of misunderstandings. A teacher accused her of cheating on a pop quiz because she had answered questions in a way that reflected the methods Daniel had taught her at home. A classmate spread a rumor that she had bribed the art teacher to get extra credit. Each accusation chipped away at her confidence, testing her resilience. One evening, Daniel noticed Emily lingering by her window, staring into the city lights with a faraway expression. He approached slowly. "You're carrying a lot on your own," he said, placing a hand lightly on her shoulder. "You don't have to." "I feel like everyone expects me to fail, or to be perfect because of you," she admitted. "I can't. Sometimes I just want to disappear." Daniel's eyes softened. "Emily, listen to me. Life will always test you, but strength isn't about never falling. It's about rising, even when you're scared, and you're not alone anymore. You never will be." The following day, as if testing their resolve, a new challenge emerged. The board had scheduled a formal review to assess whether Emily should remain at St. Mary's permanently. Daniel, juggling work obligations, could only attend briefly. Emily was left to face Principal Harris and a panel of stern-faced administrators on her own. Walking into the review room, her heart pounded. Harris looked at her expectantly. "Miss Carter, you know why you're here. The board needs to decide if this school can accommodate you properly." Emily took a deep breath, recalling Daniel's words, the nights of encouragement and the small victories she had achieved despite cruelty and misunderstanding. She straightened, lifted her chin, and spoke. "I've faced a lot of challenges, yes, but I've learned from them. I want to stay here, not because I have someone who supports me, but because I can contribute, because I can be a part of this community. And I promise to do my best to earn that respect every day." The room fell silent. Even Principal Harris, whose sternness rarely faltered, was struck by the determination radiating from the young girl. Emily left the room that afternoon feeling a flicker of hope, though the underlying tension remained. She knew that the road ahead would not be easy, that misunderstandings and obstacles were still waiting. But she also realized that with Daniel by her side, she had someone willing to face those battles with her. Yet, just as relief began to settle, a new message arrived for Daniel. A legal complication from overseas regarding his late brother's estate. The letter hinted at hidden assets, contested claims, and potential upheaval in Emily's guardianship. And in that quiet moment, both Emily and Daniel understood. The struggle wasn't over. In fact, the hardest part was only just beginning. The next morning, Daniel sat in his office, the legal letter spread across his desk. The words blurred as he read and reread the contents, each line heavier than the last. A distant cousin, long presumed uninvolved, had come forward claiming rights to the estate. If the court sided with them, Emily's guardianship and the stability they had fought so hard to achieve could be called into question. Daniel's hands shook slightly as he ran them through his hair. He had been confident, almost unshakable, in securing Emily's future. Yet now, the ground beneath him seemed uncertain, as if the world had decided to test his resolve again. Emily, sensing his tension, approached quietly. "What is it?" she asked softly, placing a hand on his arm. Daniel looked at her, his expression heavy. "There's a problem with the legal documents. Someone is contesting the estate. It could affect you." Her stomach knotted. "Affect me how?" he exhaled, realizing that sugarcoating the truth would only confuse her. "It could mean that I no longer have legal guardianship over you, at least until the courts decide. I'm sorry, I didn't see this coming." Emily's eyes widened, her breath catching. For a moment she felt panic rising, the fear of losing her newfound safety and connection to Daniel threatening to overwhelm her. But then she noticed something she hadn't seen before. Daniel's vulnerability. For all his strength and stoicism, he was human. He could falter, worry, and even fail. "I'm not going anywhere," she said firmly, surprising herself. "We'll figure it out. Together." Daniel's gaze softened. For the first time, he allowed himself to fully acknowledge the bond between them, not just uncle and niece, but two people who had survived grief and loss and were now learning to navigate life together. That afternoon, Emily returned to school with a quiet determination. The whispers followed her, but she ignored them, walking with a steady, upright posture. In class, when a teacher questioned her late submission of a project, she calmly explained the circumstances. She wasn't defensive, she was resolute. The subtle change did not go unnoticed. Even Principal Harris, lurking in the doorway, observed her with an uncharacteristic pause. After school, Harris called her into his office. He leaned against the desk, arms crossed. "Emily," he began, his voice softer than usual, "I have to admit you've changed. I've been unfair. Perhaps I underestimated you." Emily swallowed, unsure how to respond. "I've learned a lot here," she said quietly. "Not just about schoolwork, but about standing up for myself." Harris nodded. "Good. Remember, no one gets through life without challenges. How you handle them defines you." Emily left the office feeling a mixture of pride and relief. Her relationship with the principal had shifted. Less fear, more mutual acknowledgement. Yet the uncertainty of the legal dispute still loomed, a quiet shadow at the edge of her thoughts. That evening, Daniel returned home later than usual, looking exhausted but resolute. He had met with lawyers, tried to negotiate with distant relatives, and prepared for what could be a long and complicated battle. Seeing Emily waiting, homework neatly stacked on the kitchen table, he felt a surge of gratitude. "Emily," he said, kneeling beside her, "I don't know how this will end, but I do know one thing. You've shown me more courage than I could have imagined. No matter what happens with the courts, I want you to remember that." She smiled faintly. "And you've shown me that even when someone seems untouchable, they can be scared too." He chuckled softly, the tension of the day momentarily lifting. "I suppose that's true, and it's a good reminder for both of us." Late that night, as Emily lay in bed, she thought about all the challenges, the bullying, the uncertainty, and the legal complications. But she also thought about the moments of connection, the rare smiles shared with Daniel, and the small victories she had achieved on her own. She realized that life wasn't just about protection or comfort. It was about resilience, courage, and the willingness to face fear head-on. In the stillness of her room, she made a silent vow. No matter what obstacles arose, no matter how uncertain the future seemed, she would not let fear dictate her path. And for the first time, she felt fully ready to embrace the trials ahead. Because sometimes revelations weren't just about uncovering secrets, they were about discovering strength within oneself, in ways neither Emily nor Daniel could have predicted. And as the city lights flickered outside her window, both of them understood that the true test of their bond was yet to come. One that would demand courage, trust, and an unwavering belief in each other. The courtroom was silent, except for the occasional shuffle of papers and the low hum of the air conditioning. Emily sat close to Daniel, gripping his hand tightly. The weight of anticipation pressed on them both. Outside, sunlight streamed through tall windows, glinting off polished floors. But inside, time seemed suspended, every second stretching unbearably long. The opposing counsel, a sharp-eyed lawyer representing the distant cousin, approached the bench with a stack of documents. "Your Honor," she began, her voice precise and commanding, "we contest Mr. Carter's guardianship due to potential undisclosed assets and questions regarding his capacity to provide adequate care." Emily's stomach knotted. She glanced at Daniel, who gave her a small, reassuring squeeze of the hand. His jaw was tight, but his eyes held a spark of determination that mirrored her own. "Mr. Carter, are you prepared to respond?" the judge asked. Daniel rose steadily, shoulders squared. "Yes, Your Honor. I will provide full documentation of my finances, my ability to care for Emily, and my commitment to her well-being. I love my niece as my own daughter. She is safe, happy, and thriving under my guardianship." The lawyer scoffed. "Words are not enough. Proof is required." Over the next tense hours, evidence was presented. Financial records, testimonies from teachers, neighbors, and Daniel's colleagues all painted a picture of a man committed to Emily's safety and happiness. Yet the tension remained unbearable. Every word the opposing counsel uttered, every document they questioned, felt like a fresh threat to the fragile stability they had fought to secure. Emily sat quietly, listening and absorbing. She realized that she had become part of the battle too. This wasn't just about Daniel anymore, it was about her own life, her right to remain in the place she had started to call home. Her pulse thudded with anticipation, but she pushed fear aside. Finally, the judge leaned forward. After reviewing all evidence, testimonies and arguments, this court recognizes Mr. Daniel Carter as the legal guardian of Emily Carter. All claims by the contesting party are hereby denied. Relief hit like a tidal wave. Emily's chest heaved, tears pricking her eyes. She turned to Daniel, who exhaled slowly, his shoulders sagging as the tension drained from his body. For a moment, the courtroom seemed to melt away. It was just the two of them, united, victorious, and stronger than before. Daniel bent down and whispered, "We did it, Emily. We're safe." Emily's tears fell freely. "We really did it," she managed, her voice trembling. Outside the courthouse, sunlight bathed the street in a warm glow. Daniel and Emily stepped into the fresh air, breathing deeply, the heaviness of weeks of uncertainty lifting. Students from St. Mary's Academy had followed the news, some curious, others skeptical, but all aware that Emily had emerged victorious. Yet the climax wasn't only about the legal victory, it was about the transformation that had occurred along the way. Emily had found her voice, her courage, and her ability to stand firm even in the face of fear and hostility. Daniel had learned to trust, to open his heart fully, and to recognize the profound resilience of the child he had fought to protect. As they walked together down the courthouse steps, Daniel paused, lifting Emily's chin gently. "I need you to know," he said, voice steady. "This isn't just about the court. It's about life. You've shown me that bravery isn't measured by strength alone, but by the courage to keep going when everything feels impossible. And you," his eyes softened, "you've inspired me in ways I never thought possible." Emily looked up at him, a mixture of pride and love in her gaze. "I couldn't have done it without you," she admitted. Daniel shook his head. "No, you could have done this on your own. I just helped carry the weight." The moment was interrupted by the distant sound of children laughing in the park across the street. Emily's thoughts drifted back to St. Mary's, to the hallways, the whispers, and the challenges she had faced. She realized something important. Fear and doubt would always exist, but what mattered was the choice to face them, and to face them with someone who believed in you. That evening, back at their apartment, Daniel and Emily sat together on the couch, the city lights flickering outside. Daniel's hand rested lightly on hers, a silent promise that the trials were not over, but that they would face the future together. Emily leaned against him, feeling the warmth of stability for the first time in her life. The battles had been hard, painful, and relentless, but they had forged something stronger than fear, trust, love, and a bond that no legal dispute could break. And as the city hummed quietly around them, Emily whispered, almost to herself, "We're home." The weeks after the court's decision were quiet but transformative. At St. Mary's Academy, Emily's presence no longer drew whispers of pity or envy. The same students who had once avoided her now gave nods of acknowledgement, some even approaching her cautiously, as if sensing the strength she had earned. Principal Harris, once rigid and distant, had softened, offering subtle encouragement and guidance instead of reprimands. Emily had become part of the school in a way she had never thought possible. Back at home, life settled into a rhythm that felt natural for the first time in years. Daniel's work was demanding, but he no longer faced it alone. Even when he returned late from meetings, Emily would greet him with a smile, eager to share her day, her victories, and even her setbacks. Their bond had grown beyond guardianship. It was built on trust, mutual respect, and an understanding forged through adversity. One evening, as autumn painted the city in warm hues of orange and gold, Emily sat by the window, a notebook open in front of her. She wrote about her experiences, the bullying, the court case, and the moments of courage that had defined her journey. Writing gave her a sense of control over her story, a reminder that her voice mattered. Daniel entered quietly, carrying 2 mugs of hot chocolate. He set one beside her and sat down. "What are you working on?" he asked. Emily looked up, her eyes bright. "I'm writing everything down, so I never forget how far we've come, and maybe one day it could help someone else." Daniel smiled, pride swelling in his chest. "I'm sure it will. You've always been remarkable, Emily, more than I ever imagined." She blushed, turning back to her notebook. "I've learned a lot, about courage, about family, about believing in myself even when it feels impossible." The apartment was quiet, the only sounds the faint hum of the city and the soft scratching of pen on paper. In that calm, both felt a sense of peace that had once seemed unimaginable. They had faced loss, hostility, and uncertainty, and emerged stronger, bonded not just by law, but by shared resilience. Later that night, Emily stood at her bedroom window, looking at the city lights. She remembered the morning she had been told she had to leave school, the fear and loneliness that had wrapped around her like a heavy cloak. Now, she felt the warmth of belonging for the first time. Her eyes drifted to Daniel's office across the living room, where he reviewed documents with his usual diligence. She watched him for a moment, feeling gratitude and admiration for the man who had not only fought for her future, but had also taught her the power of perseverance and love. Emily turned back to the window, letting a soft smile cross her face. The world outside was vast, uncertain, and sometimes cruel, but inside she had found a home, a family, and the courage to face whatever came next. And somewhere deep inside, she knew this was only the beginning, because life would continue to challenge her, to test her spirit, and to throw obstacles in her path. But Emily Carter had learned a truth that no one could take away. She was strong, she was capable, and she would never face the world alone again. She whispered into the quiet room, a promise to herself and to Daniel, who had unknowingly become the anchor in her life. "No matter what happens, we'll be okay." Outside, the city carried on, unaware of the small victories that had just shaped one young girl's destiny. But inside that apartment, filled with the quiet glow of lamps and the warmth of newfound family, Emily and Daniel knew something far more significant had happened. They had created a bond strong enough to withstand any storm, and a life full of possibility waiting just beyond the window. And in that stillness, the world seemed a little kinder, and the future a little brighter than it had ever been before.